Hello, folks. Welcome to Broadband Deployment News. BEAD funding program's director has addressed two of the concerns that ISPs have regarding the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity requirements. Be right back with that. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So I wanted to look at this. This is a story in Telecompetitor that references a webinar that was a recent webinar that Calix did that I believe was specifically about the Buy America, Build America stuff in the NOFO. But these two questions are separate from that. So you see here, NTIA Director tries to calm ISP fears on BEAD reporting low-cost service requirements. And, there is a concern that whenever you get government regulations and stuff, it gets to a point where some of the service providers that are looking at BEAD might decide, you know what, this is just too much to handle. It's not going to be worth the effort as they look at the costs involved that sometimes the government throws in there. That's in addition to their just building the network out. And again, the goal of, as I've said before, the goal of this is to get broadband to every location, every broadband serviceable location in the United States. And the harder we make that, as far as lots of extraneous regulations, then the fewer ISPs are going to want to do that. And frankly, it's going to increase the cost. So one of the goals is also affordable broadband. And if you throw a lot of regulations on top of things, that increases the cost of deploying the broadband, and it may increase the cost of the monthly service to customers as well. So these are things we need to keep in mind. So the NTIA director was trying to allay some of the fears and answer some of these questions. So you see here, service providers shouldn't let reporting requirements or requirement to offer a low-cost service stop them from applying for BEAD funding, said Evan Feinman, BEAD program director for NTIA yesterday. Again, that was in that webinar from Calix. Feinman made his comments in that webinar organized by Calix titled Mastering BEAD Regulations. But again, I think it was, if I remember, the title had the Buy America, Build America specifically was going to be the topic, but I'm sure they covered other things. The requirement to offer a low-cost service has become a particularly big concern as funding for the ACP is set to run out. Many providers had seen the FCC's $30 a month ACP benefit for low-cost income customers as a means of meeting that requirement. Without the ACP, some providers might be reluctant to participate in the BEAD program. And I'm not sure of the thinking there, because the ACP, it provides a $30, and hopefully, if they get it going again, it would provide a $30 subsidy. But at this point, it's going to be ending here this month. But the ACP, it's a $30 subsidy that the internet service provider that participates in that program would collect from the government, basically, and then the customer can get that $30 subsidy applied to their bill. So the customer could get a $30 broadband product, and they could have $30 applied to that, and therefore it's free to them. Or they could get a gig product. Maybe it's an $80 product that's a gig symmetrical, and they get a $30 subsidy. So then they're only paying $50, they're paying $50 instead of $80. So that's how that works. But I'm not sure how what they're saying here. They say many providers had seen the FCC $30 a month ACP benefit for low-income customers as a means of meeting that requirement. But if they provide a $30 product, then they've got to give that to everybody, or they've got to make that available to everybody, not just low-income folks, but everybody. So, it would help them get more customers in that area that are low-income that maybe would not get broadband otherwise. So it helps them increase their chances of making a profit by getting more subscribers. But again, they've still got to offer that. They've got to offer that $30 product to everybody. So, and it doesn't have to be 30. I mean, if the low-cost product comes in at 40 or 50. Again, they have the subsidy that's helping to defray some of the cost of that for the low-income folks, but everybody else can still buy that product at $50 if that were the cost. As Feinman explained, individual states will set their own low-cost program requirements within guidelines set by the NTIA. Some states are saying that the providers have to offer a $30 a month service, he noted. Or some states are saying that providers have to offer a $30 a month service, he noted. But if a service provider says the economics don't work, the state can issue waivers to allow prices up to $65 or $75 a month, he said. And that's going to be the case, because it's just going to vary across the board for internet service providers based on the density, the number of customers that they have in a particular area, how difficult the area is as far as topology. Sometimes low income can make a difference there as far as, again, getting a certain number of customers to sign up. But that is definitely going to vary. So there is some leeway there, he's saying. And just to kind of go through what this looks like. So in here you see this is the low-cost plan. So it's mentioning here that each state must make sure that they're making broadband affordable. And they've got several different ways they can do that, including requiring that service providers have a particular product at a particular price. But they also mention here, it says, for example, some eligible entities may require providers receiving BEAD funds to offer low-cost, high-speed plans to all middle-class households. So in others, again, setting a particular low-cost option. Others might provide consumer subsidies to defray the subscription costs for households not eligible for the ACP. So maybe what the providers are saying there is the ACP would cover subsidies to low-income folks, and then we could provide subsidies to those that don't qualify. Maybe that's what they're saying, is that would be a way that we could do that. Others may use the regulatory authority to promote structural competition. Some might assign especially high weights to selection criteria relating to affordability and open access. So open access is one way to promote structural competition, I guess, or other ways that, try to get internet service providers to compete so that prices come down. And then, again, an open access network would be where you've got a municipality or somebody, you give them an incentive to build out a network where others can compete. But the scoring, again, it could be that scoring of their subgrants, when you have this competitive grant situation and you've got internet service providers competing, that the scoring, a big part of the scoring might be based on the low cost option. But then the other thing is the service providers have to do this. So you see here, in addition to that, each subgrantee receiving BEAD funding must offer at least one low-cost broadband service option. Each state eligible entity must consult with the Assistant Secretary regarding a proper definition of the term low-cost broadband service option. Each state shall thereafter submit a proposed definition to the Assistant Secretary for approval in its final proposal. The final proposal comes later. The Infrastructure Act directs the Assistant Secretary to define the subscribers eligible for such low-cost plans. So that's in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. So that's what the internet service providers are concerned about, and what that's going to look like. But what he's saying here is there is some leeway there, with this, it could be 65 or 75, depending on the lay of the land there. If a state already has its BEAD plan approved by NTIA, but now wants to make changes to its low-cost service requirements, there is a process for doing so, at least until Volume 2 of their initial proposal is approved, Feinman explained. And as far as I know, only one service provider at this point has had Volume 2 of their initial proposal approved, and that's Louisiana. So everybody else right now has got Volume 2 in, but those are being reviewed, and there's probably some back and forth going between the NTIA and each state on that. So there is still time if states want to consider how they might change something that they might have had in their initial proposal, both Volume 1 and Volume 2, wherever that's addressed. There's still time to make that change until that Volume 2 is officially approved. State broadband offices can work with us to edit the plan, he said. It makes sense to do it now while there's still a back and forth, and that back and forth is going on. And he's saying here, don't wait until after we approve your Volume 2 proposal, because at that point it may be too late, it sounds like. And then there's reporting requirements. I originally thought this was performance testing, and I will cover that in a minute. But here it's talking about actual just reporting after, as you're building the network and after the network's built, just reporting on everything you've done. Another BEAD requirement that may be holding some providers back from applying for funding is reporting requirements. Many providers have said that the requirements are more daunting than for other broadband funding programs, such as the Capital Projects Fund. Feinman offered providers some potential relief on this. He says, we have a very aggressive goal of reducing the amount of reports that providers have to do, he said. We'll try to get guidance out as soon as possible. Nevertheless, Feinman encouraged providers to enlist the help of people with federal grant writing experience, perhaps on a shared basis with other providers. It should be possible to use a portion of BEAD winnings to go toward the cost of hiring that expert help, he said. And I'm not sure what that expert help would be. Maybe maybe reading the notice of funding opportunity and interpreting it. And I guess, I don't know if you're helping with grants other than that. Feinman echoed a message that we heard recently. When they say we, they mean telecompetitor. We heard recently from Gina Raimondo, U.S. Secretary of Commerce. Like Raimondo, Feinman urged providers to participate in BEAD. Be ambitious, he said. There's no reason not to go big. Providers also should not let matching fund requirements prevent them from participating, Feinman said. He reminded webinar participants that state broadband offices have the option of waiving matching fund requirements when deployment costs are exceptionally high. You don't have to bring gobs and gobs of matching funds, Feinman said. Now, the requirement is 25%, and most states are probably going to be, I haven't looked at all of the proposals out there, but I'm thinking most were probably saying they were going to be doing over 25%. Feinman also cautioned all providers, including those uninterested in the BEAD program, about the requirement to participate in the challenge process. Participation in the challenge process is not optional, he said. He warned providers that their own service availability could be challenged, and if providers don't respond, they run the risk of seeing a competitor overbuild service to areas that they already serve. So that would be bad for the provider, and it would be bad in general for us as taxpayers. We don't want to be funding an area that maybe already has a gig service from some other fiber provider, or maybe there's a cable operator out there that's got good quality DOCSIS cable internet, cable modem service, and we don't want to be overbuilding that, spending money to overbuild that. This is supposed to be used to provide service to unserved and underserved areas, so that would be anything less than 100 by 20, and preferably 25 by 3. That's the starting point, right? So we want to get all of those covered and then move on to the 100 by 20. So they're making some. So they may make some kind of changes to the reporting requirements. So we're going to take a quick look at that. So this is from the Notice of Funding Opportunity. By the way, a link to the telecompetitor article as well as to this NOFO if you haven't taken some time to read through this. But here's the reporting section. So you see, it does look kind of onerous. You're starting here. The recipient of a subgrant from a state shall submit to the state a regular reporting, at least semi-annually, for the duration of the subgrant to track the effectiveness of the use of the funds provided. Each report shall describe each type of project and or other eligible activities carried out using the subgrant and the duration of the subgrant. States may add additional reporting requirements, so on top of this, or increase the frequency of reporting, making it worse, with the approval of the assistant secretary. So they do need to get approval for that. And they probably would not, I would think now, since there are some concerns, unless it was made good reason to do that. And must make all subgrantee reports available to NTIA upon request. In the case of a broadband infrastructure project, and this is for the, sorry, going to go back to the top here. Yeah, this is for the subgrantees. They must include a list of addresses or location identifications that constitute the service locations that will be served. Well, they should be able to do that, right? By the broadband infrastructure to be constructed, and the status of each project, identify new locations served within each project at the relevant reporting interviews, and the service taken, if applicable, and identify whether each address or location is residential, commercial, or community anchor institution. Some of this is almost similar to what they have to do with the broadband data collection, where they report customers. They're going to report who they are providing service to in a particular area. That's the data that goes into the broadband map, the FCC map. Describe the types of facilities that have been constructed and installed. Describe the peak and off-peak actual speeds of the broadband service being offered. Describe the maximum advertised speed of the broadband service being offered. Describe again, that's part of that max advertised speed, that's part of the broadband data collection reporting. So maybe they can pull some of this out of there because they're going to be reporting that anyway. Although I think what they're trying to do probably, I'm sure actually, now that I look at it, is they want to know specifically to this project. So it's almost like some broadband data collection reporting specific to the areas that have been funded for BEAD. So they're kind of duplicating some efforts there that the ISPs are having to do throughout their whole territory. Let's see, describe the non-promotional prices, including any associated fees charged for different tiers of broadband service being offered. That's something that they're going to have to report on the broadband labels. But again, this is just going to have to be duplicated and put in this additional reporting. List all interconnection agreements that were requested, their current status, report the number of amount of contracts and subcontracts awarded by the subgrantee, disaggregated by recipients of each such contract or subcontracts that are MBEs or WBEs. I forget what that means. Include any other data that would be required to comply with the data. So one of those catch-alls. Include anything else that would be required to comply with the data and mapping collection standards of the Commission. That's the FCC stuff, so that makes sense. Include federal financial report and meet the requirements described in the Department of Commerce, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. And here's where it gets a little ugly. For projects over $5 million, subgrantee may provide a certification that for the relevant project, all laborers and mechanics employed by contractors and subcontractors in the performance of such project are paid wages at rates not less than those prevailing as determined by the Secretary of Labor, that stuff on labor. Let's see, the number of contractors and subcontractors working the project, number of workers on the project hired directly and hired through a third party, the wages and benefits of workers on the project, whether those wages are at rates less than those prevailing, lots of this stuff regarding labor. If a subgrantee is not provided a certification of a project, that a project either will use a unionized project workforce or includes a project labor agreement, meaning a pre-hire collective bargaining agreement, then the subgrantee must provide a project workforce continuity plan detailing, and then this stuff, steps taken to ensure the project has ready access to a sufficient supply of appropriately skilled and unskilled labor, blah, blah, blah. Steps taken to minimize the risks of labor disputes, steps taken to ensure a safe and healthy workplace, the name of any subcontracted entity performing work on the project, total number of workers employed, steps taken and to be taken to ensure workers on the project receive wages and benefits sufficient to secure an appropriately skilled workforce, comply with any other reasonable reporting requirements determined by the state to meet the reporting requirements established by the Assistant Secretary, and certify that the information in the report is accurate. So it's a lot of it. I think a lot of the complaints are maybe around those last things related to the labor requirements. And again, this is just stuff that was kind of piled into this that is not so much about making sure everybody gets broadband at affordable prices. Some of these regulations are a little bit onerous, like I say. And then there is the speed. It mentioned, making sure that the service meets certain speeds. So there is the reporting requirement, or I should say performance testing that's required. Oh, and this, by the way, this was the other thing that I was going to mention about the low-cost option. If a subgrantee fails to comply with the low-cost option, then corrective action can be taken, including recoupment of funds from the subgrantee. But as I mentioned, there's also performance testing that's required. In the notice of funding opportunity, pretty much what it says, all it says is that it will be pretty much what we have with CAFII, that's the Connect America Fund Phase 2, and the RDOF, Rural Digital Opportunity Fund performance testing. And that's something that internet service providers that are receiving funds from that are already having to do. On RDOF, if the networks haven't been deployed, they haven't had to do this yet, but it's something that is in the NOFO, so to speak, the rules for RDOF and for CAFII. And, so therefore, this should be what the performance testing will look like for the BEAD program. So you can see your speed and latency must be tested from an active customer premise to an FCC-designated IXP, Internet Exchange Point. Up to 50 locations per service tier per state must be tested, and that's going to depend on the number of subscribers. Tested locations are generated randomly by USAC. Testing must take place 1 week out of each quarter, must be between 6 p.m. and 12 a.m. local time. Speed and latency tests can be conducted in different weeks. And then you've got your performance requirements. So 80% of the speed measurements must be at 80% of the required speeds. So, for example, if the required speeds are, I don't know if they're talking about specifically, you have to meet, let's say, over 100 by 20, or if you say you're offering a gig plan. I think it's like if you're saying you're offering a gig, then you need to be somewhere in that range. So here's the 80% of speed measurements must be at 80% of the required speeds. A single speed measurement of 10 to 15 seconds duration, at least one test per testing hour per location. And then latency, 95% of latency measurements must be at or below 100 milliseconds round trip time. It may be 120 for BEAD. I just copied this from what I had for RDOF, and I believe BEAD is 120 milliseconds or less. So it may be that the testing requirements for BEAD will be 120 milliseconds or less. Or maybe it is going to be 100. I don't know. Maybe this is like an extra step to make sure that you're doing that. But I would think it would be based on the latency requirements in the notice of funding opportunity. So maybe that should be 120 milliseconds there. So again, I think the big challenge is going to be that some internet service providers, especially smaller ones, will look at some of the regulations, the rules in here regarding labor and matching funds and the low cost option, especially for rural operators where their costs are going to be much higher. They've got fewer customers and more challenging territory to cover. And they're not used to doing this. That's a big part of it. Is many of the smaller guys, they don't regularly do grants, so they're looking at this paperwork and all of these requirements and rules and thinking, I'm not sure I want to do this. So that's a big challenge. So again, here the director was trying to allay some of those fears or some of those concerns as far as the low cost option, and then as far as the reporting. So maybe that will help. But again, I think what they're saying, their message is, don't just turn your back on it and walk away. I agree with them. Go ahead and look into applying for funds, and just, you got to do it. If you've got an area that makes sense for you, where you could get funding for that, and you have not served that area because of the fact that maybe it's just too costly for you, here's an opportunity to get funds to help you do that. And you should do that. And, the other thing that he said was, make sure you participate in the challenge process. Even if you're not going to seek out funds, participate in the challenge process, because you want to make sure that if you've got an area that you're covering, that somebody doesn't come in there and overbuild. Now, you shouldn't have to have that happen. If you go to the FCC map and it shows that you are covering that area, then you should be okay. But if somebody challenges that and you don't respond, and you're not aware that challenge process is going on, and suddenly it's taken off of the map, then you have that risk of getting overbuilt in an area where you're providing service. So you need to be aware of that. And then again, check out our website if you need help with grant assistance. Check out our page and look for, I think it's under broadband grants, under the products, broadband grant assistance, something like that. Check that out, and you can look at some information about an application that will kind of walk you through the process of what you need to do. You can, it's got maps where you can look at what areas are covered, which ones are not. You can kind of draw areas where you want to look at providing service. It will calculate some numbers for you, give you kind of a thumbnail of how much it might cost. There's lots of stuff in there that can really help you. So if you can feel a little bit better about that, then maybe you can jump in there and participate in the BEAD funding. You've got time to do it because, again, there's only one state that's had their Volume 2 proposal approved, and that's approved now. And there's some states that are initiating their challenge process because you didn't have to have your Volume 2 proposal approved to start your challenge process. So some states have started that, where, again, if you're in that area, you need to be looking at that, where they are now allowing folks to challenge the coverage that they have in the maps that are showing whether or not broadband is somewhere or not. So states are starting to do that. Once that's done, then they start to get involved in selecting their subgrantees. So then you've got the competitive grant process at that point. So again, check out our website, see how we can help you. But if you've got any questions, feel free to email us at info@zcorm.com. I'll try to get answers for you if I can, if it's just something in general about the process, and we'll help you if we can. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, ring the bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. If this was helpful or interesting, if you give me a like on the video, I'd appreciate it. And I will see you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Take care. Bye-bye.